Hey y'all, I have quite the doozy today. It was one of those ones where it was already kind of a big story. Like there's so much information on this person. That was already kind of daunting within itself because, what do I take out? What do I leave in? The more I dove into this story, the more layers there were. And not in a good way. We have quite a lot to cover today, so just sit back, relax, probably grab a snack, and let's dive into the life of Lewis Carrol. Now, like I said, there is so much to this story. So obviously I can't include just everything about his life. So know that going in. I'm just kind of doing the biggest points of his life. So then that way you kind of just get a big enough picture about him, and then you can kind of come to your own conclusions that way. But if you wanted to know more, there's definitely more to know about this guy. And please make sure to like and subscribe. I'd love for you to stick around. I do these deep dives on authors and illustrators just to know more of the history of kind of what brought about the books that we know and love. And it's been very fascinating. So make sure to like and subscribe. And today we're talking about Lewis Carrol, which for those of you who know, just right off the bat, you're probably thinking, why is she using his pen name? So Lewis Carrol is actually his pen name, alter ego, whatever you want to call it. And I'm doing that for a specific reason, because his dad's name was also Charles. So he was born Charles. As I'm telling these stories, it'd be very confusing if I'm saying Charles. And I know I can say Charles Sr., Charles Jr. That's just too much. Okay, I don't want to say the name Charles 500 times. So I'm going to be referring to him as Lewis, but just know that he wasn't born Lewis. He was born Charles. So I will kind of share at what point he does use his pen name, so you can kind of know that. But I just thought this was going to be the easiest way for everybody to listening in, because I know a lot of people listen to this stuff and I didn't want to confuse people. Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, I think that's how you pronounce his middle name, was born on January 27th of 1832 in Cheshire, England. And he was born to Charles Dodgson, like I had kind of mentioned, and his mom's name was Frances. He was the oldest boy of the family. He was third oldest overall, and there was 11 of them total. That's crazy. I could not imagine. Lewis was born into a family full of clergymen and army officers. That was kind of his family line. That's where a lot of them came from. And his dad was even a cleric for the Church of England as well. So carrying on the family line of doing all that work. Because of a job post change for his dad, this caused the family to up and move. Now, this new place would become their new home for the next 25 years. So obviously they were there for quite a while. And eventually his dad became the Archdeacon of Richmond. Lewis kind of talks about how his dad would get involved in these really heated or lively discussions revolving a lot of issues that were happening at the church with the time. It was causing a divide within the church. So his dad was very involved with these lively debates. Hey y'all, it's future me. I'm just going to pop in here real fast. I just want to let you know that I am a children's book author and illustrator. So I do have 2 of my own books here. If you'd like to check them out, I'll have them linked down below for you. But then I also have some other really fun items as well. So some bookmarks, some Kindle charms, art stickers, all that kind of fun stuff. So if you'd like to check it out, just head down below. Thank you so much for any support, and let's go ahead and just jump back into the video. While he was still young, Lewis was taught at home, and at the age of 7, his family was very proud that he was a very good reader. They said that he was even enjoying books like The Pilgrim's Process. So, good. And while he was young too, he kind of developed a stammer. Now, what I thought was interesting is the stammer actually was found within multiple of his siblings. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't realize that. Can stammers be genetic? I don't know if I really thought of that, if that was a possibility. So apparently some of his siblings also had the same stammer. But what was also funny too is from other people's accounts of Lewis, some people recalled the stammer and then other people didn't. But it was something that Lewis was very self-conscious of. So it's kind of funny that it was something he was so self-conscious of, but some people recall it and some people don't. Some people just didn't even realize he was doing it. So it just goes to show that sometimes things that really bother us personally and we think that it's very noticeable to everyone else a lot of the times other people don't even notice at all because they have their own things going on in their mind. So after the family had moved to Richmond for his father's new position that we discussed, he was sent to the school that was there in Richmond. And then in 1846, he was sent to rugby school. And he, from his own words, he did not like it there. And unfortunately, I mean, that just seems to be the trend, doesn't it? I mean, with all the other stories that we've done that are all kind of around similar time periods, all the kids that were sent to like boarding schools did not seem to like it at all for many, many different reasons. So we are following in the same trend. He even said in his own words, quote, this is what he said: "I cannot say that any earthly considerations would induce me to go through my 3 years again. I can honestly say that if I had ever been secure from annoyance at night, the hardships of daily life would have been comparative trifles to bear." So he never explicitly comes out and says that he was bullied, but he like makes mentions of things like this that kind of just allude to that kind of behavior, which also because of the other stories that we have read and know about, we know that this also was happening within the school as well. So this would not be like some random occurrence that just doesn't happen. This seems to be very, very common. Now later, one of his family members, Stuart Dodgson Collingwood, I think he was either like a cousin or an uncle, I can't remember. He said that most people knew him as like a gentle person, as like a gentle boy, but because of this school, he did learn how to use his fists in defense of righteous causes. So he learned how to defend like smaller people from bullies, and he would often have to use his fists to do that. And while he was in school, one of his major talents was school and education himself, especially in mathematics, which I can say that I envy that. But it's fine. We won't go into that. And even his math master, R.B. Mayer, even commented that, Lewis was one of the smartest kids that he had seen since coming to rugby. Like, he's just never seen a kid that good with math. And so he was very impressed with him himself. Apparently, there's a textbook of Lewis's that is still alive to this day. Like, it survived to this day. It was one of his math textbooks. And there's an inscription in the front of the book that's written in Latin, and it translates to this: "This book belongs to his full name, hands off!" exclamation point. And then he also had different annotations like throughout the book as well, where he's making comments about like the different lessons and questions. And one of them even said this: "Not a fair question in decimals." So he had written all these like little annotations on the side of his textbook. So the sponge that I normally use to do my foundation, I left it upstairs. And I just don't feel like going upstairs. So we're going to use one of my random brushes. We'll go with it. So he finally leaves rugby in 1849. And this is when he goes on to Oxford University, but he had to wait for some rooms to come available. So he was finally able to start in January of 1851. Now, he was only at Oxford for 2 days when he got a message that he needed to come home. And his mother had unfortunately passed away from inflammation of the brain. So people are kind of speculating that this could have been either like meningitis or even a stroke. And she was only 47 at the time. People also said that Lewis was the type of person where, now he was very naturally gifted, like especially when it came to like certain subjects in school, but he was also the one that if he didn't really want to do something, he wasn't going to do it. Like, good luck getting him to do it, And I feel like all of us can be like that to a certain degree. So I kind of get that. And Lewis also had his own kind of health issues as well from when he was a kid. So apparently he was 6 feet tall. He had curly hair, like curly brown hair. And then depending on who you talk to, he either had blue or gray eyes. So that was kind of always the choice there, depending on who you talk to. Apparently when he was a little kid, he suffered a pretty severe fever that left him deaf in one of his ears. And then also because of a knee injury, people kind of said that he kind of walked kind of stiffly as he was walking. And when he would turn 17, he had a very, very bad case of the whooping cough, which is said later to have caused him a very weak chest later in his life. So I think it just kind of really affected him like long term. Now, something that Lewis enjoyed doing all of his life from when he was very young was creating short stories and just kind of entertaining people. He even did this with his siblings, and he just loved to entertain his siblings. He liked to make these stories, and he would even kind of write them down and create like little magazines and things like that. Now, most of these stories were kind of humorous and satirical. That seemed to kind of be his kind of default setting, was he kind of liked to be in this realm. But then in March of 1856, this is when he finally publishes his first item under the name Lewis Carrol. So that would be his pen name that would become so famous. This was actually kind of a break away from what he typically did, and this was a romantic poem called Solitude. Now, some people might be thinking, where did he get Lewis Carrol from? You know, this is kind of like the random facts that I enjoy. Now, do I do anything with these facts? Not really. Not unless this was to come up in conversation some random point in the future. But here's where Lewis Carrol comes from. Okay, so I gotta read my notes here. So Lewis was the anglicized name for Luvoicus. I'm gonna put all this stuff up here on the screen, okay? Which is Latin for Lutwidge, which I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry. Which is his middle name. And then Carroll is an Irish surname similar to the Latin name Carolus, from which comes the name Charles. So it's basically like he was using his own name. He was just kind of switching things around. Now, this is where his life kind of takes a turn. So in 1855, this is when Dean Liddell, 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 I think it's Liddell. They arrived at Christ Church. Sorry. The names, I'm sorry. They arrived at Christ Church on Oxford University. Now, this family would go on to have a huge impact on Lewis's life, and we're going to get into all the reasons why. So Lewis actually got very, very close with the families, including their oldest boy, Harry. So what Lewis would do was he would actually, with the parents' blessing, he would take Harry out. It started with Harry. He would take Harry out on these like boating trips. He would like roll down the river. They would pack a picnic. It was a whole thing. Okay. Well, then eventually it moved to the daughters, which were Lorena, Edith, and Alice. Now there are some stories where there was always like an adult present there. But after kind of reading things, I'm not sure that was always the case. I'm just saying. So, because just what comes up next. So like I said, the family came at 1855. Now, there's one thing I haven't told you yet about Lewis. Now that he was an avid journal writer, like he had diaries. Okay. He wrote a whole bunch of diaries. Okay. And he did this quite often. Well, for some reason, the years 1856 to 1862 are missing. Now, there's theories to this. We're going to kind of jump into that later, but it's just going to kind of raise some flags of the stories that we're about to go through. Now, on one of these boating trips in July 4th of 1862, this is when he was taking the girls out on a boating trip. And this is when he actually shares with them a story that he conjured up in his mind. Alice, who was 10 at the time, was so excited that the main character shared her name. So this was the beginning of the book that we know as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So when he told the girls this story, they were so excited, and especially Alice, because here this main character has her name. And so she told him, please write it down, like make it into a book. It'd be so awesome. And that's exactly what he did. So after he kind of writes down like an early version of the story, he gives it off to his friend and mentor, George MacDonald. And George immediately loves it. He's like, absolutely, you need to get this published. This is amazing. So that's when Lewis took the manuscript over to Macmillan Publishing. He read the story, absolutely loved it. They wanted to do it, so he ended up finishing up the story. And before they published the book, they actually went through several different working titles. The first title that Lewis had it like kind of titled as was Alice's Adventures Underground. And there were some other working titles, including Alice Among the Fairies and Alice's Golden Hour. And that was before they settled on the official title of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And then they brought in Sir John Tenniel, who did all the illustrations, which I think are so cute. I love seeing those original illustrations. They're so cute. Now, when things like this become very, very successful, because this book was super, super successful for Lewis, his career completely changed. He released this book and his popularity just shot off. And it was kind of like an open secret that people knew that he was also Lewis Carroll. It wasn't like super, super secretive. You know, like, because sometimes with pen names, people keep it super hush hush and you have no idea who's who. So, but it was kind of an open secret. People kind of knew. But typically when books like this come out, a lot of rumors start to kind of fly around as to, you know, what inspires the book, you know, certain things that happened because of the book or, you know, blah, blah, blah. And one of these rumors was that Queen Victoria loved the book so much that she was insistent that the next book be dedicated to her. But this seems to be just a rumor because even Lewis himself comes out to say that this didn't happen. Now, Queen Victoria did love the book. And I did read somewhere that even Lewis himself was invited to come and entertain, I believe it was her grandchildren. That did happen, but the whole dedication of the book, that seems to be a rumor. There's also a lot of different theories about the book itself. Now, there's some dark elements here that we're going to be jumping into, but some of the lesser ones is, you know, there's theories that Alice Liddell, I think that's how you pronounce it. I think it was Alice Liddell who inspired the character Alice. Now, Lewis himself says that this apparently is not the case. I don't know if I fully believe that, but you let me know. You let me know what you think. But also, the bunny who's always late in the book was set to be inspired from Alice's dad, who was apparently always checking his pocket watch. And then the Queen of Hearts was set to be inspired from Queen Victoria herself. And then the Mad Hatter, what I thought was very interesting was that was actually a character who kind of referenced at the time when they got these animals to create like hats and different things, they had to use a lot of chemicals for these animal skins to create like hats and other items. And because of the constant exposure and even using chemicals, I believe like mercury, it caused people to go insane. It actually caused them to go insane because of all the chemical exposure. And so that's kind of where the Mad Hatter comes in. So he's going Mad Hatter. So I thought that was interesting. Things I forgot to mention was Lewis suffered from very, very bad migraines. And, you know, people who suffer from migraines are said to kind of experience almost like auras around people. Well, Lewis's migraines were so bad that they would actually like affect his eyesight to the point where certain things around him, like his own hands and things, would shrink or grow with size. And it's like, that's like the way he was perceiving it in his mind. So people say that in the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland book, you're almost kind of getting a sense of his vision and like what he experienced. So that's kind of where that comes into play. I just wanted to throw that in. Lewis's father did pass away in 1868. And then just a few years later in 1871, this is when Lewis releases the sequel to the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland book. It's called Through the Looking Glass. This death from his dad was very devastating to him and drove him into a depression. And people say that you can kind of see these darker elements in that sequel book. I haven't read that book, but it would be very interesting to go in and see it. And then he also wrote the very successful book, The Hunting of the Snark. And this was later turned into like other theater productions and kind of things like that. It was also a very well known. Now, here's the part where we get a little bit darker. And, you know, there's a lot of open ends here. So I'm really curious to see what you personally think about all this. There's a lot of debate still kind of in the scholarly community on what's real, what's not, rumor, fact, all that kind of stuff when it comes to this. So we kind of have to take in all the information and just kind of go from there. So yeah. Now, when it comes to his relationship with Alice, a lot of people said that this just like really crossed a lot of boundaries. He spent a lot of time with her and, you know, just more than what was probably normal. Now we're going to go back just a little bit because he knew the family for quite a while. He met Alice initially when she was 6 years old. And then they went on those boating trips when the girls were a little bit older. And then all of a sudden in 1863, the relationship with the family was just like cut. And after doing some digging, we find out that in July of 1863, this is when Lewis takes Alice out on a boating trip. And I believe it was just her. In a diary entry, he mentions that he had a pleasant experience with a pleasant conclusion. We don't really know what this is exactly because the next page of the diary is completely ripped out. So we have no idea what happened, but Mrs. Liddell was apparently so enraged at something that had happened on the boat trip that she cut all ties with them. And the only time that he had any more contact with Alice from that point was a few months later down the line. He gave her a bound copy of Alice's Adventures Underground before it was officially created and everything. So it was kind of a gift to her because he knew she really loved the story. And so he gave that book to her. And just to remind everybody, so when they would have gone on that boat trip together in 1863, Lewis would have been 31 and Alice would have been 11. I mean, that's just not appropriate at all. That's not appropriate. Now, there was also this other hobby of Lewis's that he did for quite a while. He was really big into photography. And at the time, photography was kind of a newer technology, and he was absolutely in love with it. So he was very big into photography. He had a lot of items in his portfolio. He had things like trees and statues and paintings, kind of normal things, family portraits, that kind of stuff. But then there's this other chunk of his portfolio. By today's standards, we would deem absolutely inappropriate and would call for jail time. And that was either semi-nude or nude photos of children. And apparently, I was kind of reading into this, that apparently at the time, this was more commonplace in Victorian England than our society today. which I can say, heck yeah. That would not fly today at all. But apparently in Victorian England, people saw kind of the child form as just innocence and beauty, and people would even put it on postcards. They would get pictures of their kids done and then share them around, which is crazy to me. I don't understand that. What? And so apparently this was like very commonplace at the time, but a lot of people said that his infatuation with Alice just went beyond what was like normal. That's what people are saying. Even in clothed situations, it was a little bit beyond what was deemed normal. He was also very, very meticulous when it came to tracking all of his photos and logging everything. And for some reason, at one point, about 60% of his portfolio was deliberately destroyed. I'm just saying. I mean, that's kind of weird. Watch a lot of true crime. That's weird. Could be nothing. Could be nothing. I'm just saying. This is all theory. We don't really know anything for surety. I'm just saying. And I also read somewhere that the photos that he did do of kids in this way, he said that he always had a parent present. But I read other stories where it seemed like the Liddell family didn't know that he was doing this. So I don't even know if that was always the case. It didn't seem like that was always the case. And mind you too, Lewis his whole time was working for the church. So this is all happening at the same time as him writing, being with the Liddell family. All this is happening at the same time. And then what I found weird was with the photography. So he kept up his photography for 24 years. 24 years. He was doing it for 24 years. And then all of a sudden he just abruptly stopped in 1880. And his excuse was that keeping up his studio was just too time consuming. So let me know what you think of that. We also remember we talked about all of the diary entries that he's making as well. People do say that he makes a lot of pleads to God to help deliver him from his temptation to do sin. Now, he never specifies which sin or sins he's talking about. Okay, we don't know that for sure, but he does mention that in his diary several times. People who knew him also said that he was very pure in heart. He just loved kids. It was very innocent. He loved kids from when he was little. It was just very natural for him. And he said that he apparently, like, he was attracted to like women. So apparently, I think it just depends on who you talk to. But I don't know. I know. Where did my clips go? I had to run off to go get my son from preschool. And so let me finish up all this and then we're going to just convene together and we're going to go over everything real fast. Okay, there we go. So that is the life of Lewis Carrol. So apart from all the writing that he also did as well, he was also very, very smart at math. He did a lot of things in math and he was also an inventor of sorts. He invented a lot of games and kind of things of that nature. Now, regardless of all the success from the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and all of his other books that were very successful, he did have some other books that weren't as successful, but he was bringing in a good amount of money from those books. But regardless of all of that, he ended up staying at the church and working for the church until 1881. And then he did pass away in January of 1898 from pneumonia. So very interesting story today. Lots of open ends. So let me know what your theories down below. Do you think that there's some credence to some of these kind of darker theories? Do you think that they're just kind of all hearsay? I'm just very interested to kind of hear y'all's thoughts because I was honestly kind of torn. And I still kind of am, honestly, because I don't know. I can see some of the things from both sides, but then there's other things where I'm like, well, that's just weird. Like, regardless of what time period you're in, let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'd love to have you stick around, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.